Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hello and welcome to Pasture to Pen, a new video series from the Ever.Ag Insights team. Each episode, we strive to bring you news and updates on the cattle markets to help producers manage their risk. I am your host, Todd Rowen, joined as always by my co-host, Trey Freeman. We are live today from Canadian Texas at the Hemphill County Beef Conference. Joining us today is Senior Director Jim Sullivan. Jim, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And to get us started off this episode, Trey is going to briefly walk us through some weather updates and maybe even some pasture conditions, specifically in his area of the world, in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and just kind of walk us through, the special weather events you've been having this week.
You bet. Well, still pretty dry in our part of the world, western Oklahoma, Oklahoma Panhandle, North Texas, Southwest Kansas. You know, I read an article the other day where Texas County, Oklahoma, that's in the Oklahoma Panhandle, it's been over 220 days since we have received a quarter inch of rain or more. So that's a record for all-time lowest annual precipitation in the entire state of Oklahoma, with 6.5 inches in all of 2022. Now, so far 2023, we've received 0.6 inches of rain. So an interesting comparison, Death Valley so far in 2023 has received 0.9 inches. So that's the bad news. We've been dealing with it. Drought conditions persist. However, this week we do have some rain in the forecast over the next week. Looks like western Oklahoma, a little further east of me, central Oklahoma got some nice rains this morning. So there's still hope, but pretty interesting comparison, I thought, as far as western Oklahoma to Death Valley. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, when you're drier than Death Valley, you're pretty dry. We had a cattle on feed report come out for the month of March. It definitely has rattled the futures market a little bit. The report itself is lower than last year, but it is higher than expectations. We're still seeing good demand based off of that report, but across the board, every category came in at 99% of last year, and we can definitely see that has rattled the futures market the last couple of trading sessions. Trey, anything to add on top for a futures update for this episode?
Yeah, I mean, just brief recap of last week. Fat cattle futures finished 80 cents to $1.20, a hundredweight higher on the week. Feeder cattle finished $3.50 to $6 a hundredweight higher across the board week over week. So far this week, we've observed pretty small trading ranges in both fats and feeders, with the lows having been upheld from last week. April feeders are the exception, taking out last week's low already. April goes off in 2 days though, so it doesn't make for much importance. So that's trading off the cash index. April fat cattle currently trading at a $10 premium to June. April fats go off the board Friday, so expect to see some volatility. Wouldn't be surprised to see a rip higher in June once April goes off the board, as cash is still trading in the mid to high 170s as of last week. Now, two things stand out to me after today's close. First, in fat cattle, a June flag seems to be forming with a low posted on March 23rd. That was followed by a 3-week rip higher to 166. Over the next few days, we had a couple big candles down and then have kind of traded sideways. So that's what we would call a bull flag. With April going off the board Friday, maybe expect some fireworks. So the other thing that stands out is the last hour to hour and a half of trade today saw some very heavy pressure in October and November feeders. I was looking at volume. We saw a jump in volume in October feeders. Yesterday, our total volume was about 980 contracts. Today, it was 2,500 contracts, with a large percentage of that being within about a 30-minute time frame. November, we saw a 660 total volume yesterday. Today, we saw a total volume of 2,200. And with that pressure, I don't know what caused that. I don't have a reasonable explanation, but it certainly warrants caution. We really saw the October, November, January, and March feeders really take a hit today. So again, I don't have a reasonable explanation for that, but that's a lot of volume. Looked like long liquidation to me. Some buyers taking some profits. So again, it does warrant caution.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Trey. Moving to the cash side, the last couple of weeks have shown a lot of strength since our last episode. Actually, a couple days after our last episode, we saw the CME feeder cattle index jump $6 on 2 different days, and that is for the 7-day average. Typically on that 7-day average, we all know that the LRP policies settle to that 7-day average. Us on the broker agent side like to talk about that 7-day average because that really helps smooth out some of the price shocks, if you will, on the cash side as those LRP policies expire. But we saw that 7-day average jump $6 2 different days. On top of that, we saw live cattle trade at an all-time record at 186 in the north, 175 to 177 in the south. Those prices have come down since then. Last week into current week, we're seeing the South trade around the low 170s. The North is still high 170s up into the 180s. So cash has settled, if you will, but we're still seeing very strong cash prices. And as we talked to our producers, cash is obviously what's going to pay the bills. Moving to the cutout. The cutout values still remain strong. We have a choice price that's up above 300, currently at 307, with a select price that's not too far behind at 288.70. Speaking of the cutout values and choice, select, as we move into the meat, if you will, I want to bring back and reintroduce, if you will, our guest, Mr. Jim Sullivan, who is a senior director here at Ever.Ag, and have him talk a little bit about the market past the cattle, if you will. So, Jim, again, welcome to the show, and I will let you take it away.
Thanks again for having me here. This is fun.
Absolutely.
What I thought would be good to sort of piggyback on what you spoke about as it relates to cattle and the beef cutout, just this run up that we've seen in beef trim so far this year. So I've been watching, rather closely the pricing for beef trim, beef 50s and beef 90s, right? So if you're not familiar, in order to make those juicy, delicious burgers that we all love, and we're getting ready to throw on our grills here, just as long as it finally warms up here in the Midwest. I don't know when that's going to happen, but so you have 50% lean beef trim and 90% lean beef trim, and those are the headline items that people watch, right? So far this year, particularly the pricing in beef 50s has just been on a tear, right? Seasonally, beef trim, much like the cattle, we'll see prices rise from January through the spring, right? As we anticipate that summer grilling season ramping up. Beef 50s typically rally from January through April, sometimes into May, before they then decline for most of the rest of the year until they get a little bit of a bump, maybe around Labor Day when we fire up our grills again, right? Beef 90s are the same in that you typically start the year at a low point, you rally through the spring. There's a bit of a lull in the summer, and then they rise again to throughout the year. To me, what is interesting and unusual, right? So it's not unusual that we're seeing the direction of prices going up. What is unusual is the magnitude of it, right? So when I look at beef 50s, the fattier trim, we started the year, January's average price was around 110. We are currently, as of yesterday's report, we're trading just under $1.80. So 70-cent move in the span of 4.5 months. That is a really sharp, strong move to the upside. On the lean side, beef 90s trim also up, right? It's went from about 245 to start the year to about 280 right now. So again, really pricey, large, sharp moves to the upside. And it's interesting because when we think about it, beef 90s, I guess the magnitude of that move from about 245 to 280 is not as large as it is on the side for fatty 50s trim. But we got to remember that other than COVID, particularly in beef 90s, we're nearing all-time highs, right? So there's 2 times that beef 90s have traded over $3, and one of those times was during COVID in 2020. The other time was in 2014. And why I want to bring up 2014, especially for you guys that are really deep in the cattle market, 2014 was a year that is similar to what we are in right now as far as the herd contraction and the situation we have in cattle. So I went back and looked at 2014, and what I see is that, especially when I look at beef 50s, in 2014, beef 50s, the pricing from January, February, and March was almost identical to what we've seen so far this year. Where we're different is in April of 2014, pricing for beef 50s trim and for beef 90s, it came off, right? It hit that spring seasonal high and declined. What we've seen this year in beef 50s, it's been straight up. There's not been a downtick yet. And I think the major difference, at least a thought I had, is as Americans, we love our fast food, particularly cheeseburgers. And the demand that we're seeing at quick service restaurants, particularly for cheeseburgers, despite the inflation, the higher prices, and the potential looming economic slowdown, no pun intended, it has yet to take a bite out of this burger. So I'm really curious to watch this, to see how much longer we can sustain these very, very high prices, and also what that means going forward as we see cattle prices rise, as we see beef continue to be the preferred item on the menu. So again, thanks for having me, guys. This is really interesting stuff.
Yes, sir. Jim, thank you very much. It just hearing you talk and present us with all those statistics, it makes me think that we have strong demand as we move into a strong demand, what is typically a strong demand season with the summer grilling months. So if we can relate those prices back down the supply chain, if you will. I know if you're a regular viewer to this show, you hear me try to talk about all angles and then relate it back to cattle prices for our producers. So Jim, would you agree, that we are still seeing strong demand, that we are seeing a consumer kind of shrug off these high beef prices and yet still choose beef?
I would agree, and I think it's funny to just today. I haven't seen the numbers yet, right? But McDonald's reported their earnings today, and what they're reporting and what we're seeing is, we like our convenience food, right? We like the drive-through, we like that, and typically what we're ordering is we're getting a burger, and so as prices keep going higher, we keep paying them, right? And as we've seen, if we're going to pick, beef is usually the item that you pick, right? You think about the nicest meal that you're going to have, you're probably getting a steak. And so it is interesting, though, as I noted before, right? We're approaching all-time high prices, particularly in lean beef trim. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we get back to that level. Do we blow right past it, or do we sort of hit a point where it kind of perhaps puts a dent in that demand? Stay tuned.
Sure, absolutely, and that's absolutely what I was going to say is stay tuned. We've harped on it. I was on the grain feed last week. We've put it in our newsletter. Stay tuned, because these replacement cattle are very expensive, and I think they're very expensive because, as Jim has pointed out, you've got 50s trim prices that are very high. You've got 90s trim prices that are very high. You've got a cutout. The choice side is up above 300. We have very high prices. And I'll say it again, these replacement cattle are going to remain expensive. It will not hurt a producer to think about risk management on the buy side, buying those cattle into your operation, because on the sell side, things are looking very good. Demand seems strong. Again, retail prices, cut out, live cattle prices are very, very strong, especially on the cash side for the live cattle right now. If you are a producer with a strong profit margin, not only hedge your buys, but hedge your sells, get that strong profit margin locked in, because sometimes we simply don't know where things could go. We don't know what black swan is lurking around the corner. not to sound like a naysayer, because again, we do have very strong prices across the board. That is a wrap for today's episode on Pasture to Pen. Again, Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Trey. You're an awesome partner in crime. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Corey. Thank you to all the Ever.Ag Insights team for making this show a reality. Also, thank you to the viewers for viewing in. We sure appreciate your views and your comments. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you can be alerted about future episodes. And until then, stay safe and pray for rain.